Hi, thanks for joining me for this new episode of Time to Get Unstuck here on the 24/7 Live Network. Today I have a really fun guest. I hope it's a fun guest. When I met her, I thought she was fun, Karen Hand. But before I get to her, I want to talk about our sponsor, which we totally appreciate, Hypnothoughts Platinum. And that's htplatinum.net if you want to look that up. It's 3 days, February 28th, 29th, and March 1st in 2020 in San Diego. It is a little bit different than our Hypnothoughts Live that we've talked about in the past. It's a smaller group of people. It's 6 presenters, half a day each, and it's about taking your practice, not for brand new people really, it's for people that already have a practice, and it's from going from good to better. Just elevating what you've got going on and learning some new things from very distinguished professionals in hypnosis. So htplatinum.net when you get a chance, and thank you for that. So today's going to be interesting. Karen, we've known each other peripherally. Would you? And her name is Karen Hand. And she's a hypnotist. She's also a hypnosis and NLP trainer and a best-selling author. And again, we've known each other peripherally, and we got to know each other better when we saw each other at a conference. We could talk forever. So I was so excited about having her here. And the word that we're going to talk about is boundaries. So thank you, Karen, for being here.
Thank you for having me, Greg. I'm thrilled.
Yeah, because I know you're really busy. You have a conference coming up in Chicago that you do every year.
The Mid-America Hypnosis Conference, always the third weekend in October.
Yeah, so I appreciate you taking the time. So boundaries, here we go.
Boundaries. Yeah, not necessarily my strong suit.
I can understand that. I think there's a confusion around boundaries. I think or feel that a lot of us didn't learn good boundaries growing up because everybody, our parents, our family, however we grew up, foster home, whatever it is, everybody was vying for their own space and their own things, needing what they want. And some of us, okay, I'll give it to you, or I'll take everything. It can be totally the opposite.
Yes, yes. Some of us grew up in an environment where we had to stick within parental figures' boundaries and always had to figure out where they were. I became very adept as a child of figuring out how to maneuver back and forth between what was expected of me and what I wanted to do. And I always had to put what I wanted aside because it didn't fit into somebody else's boundaries. So I grew up knowing how to do that and found myself as an adult doing that too and had to stop it. Stop it now. Like the Bob Newhart hypnosis thing. Stop it. Stop it now.
So what I'm hearing is that for you, and I'm sure for many people listening that had this same situation or like situation, that growing up within other people's boundaries and sticking to them as an adult, but then they're not working.
Right. And that's when one has to step back and go, wow, what I am doing is not working for me. And while I've learned, Greg, to set boundaries and live within the boundaries, it pops up. It pops up, right? When people want something from you. And I like to give people what they need or what they want. Sure, I can do that. No, I can't always do that. I have to step back and live within my boundaries that I have set. Mm-hmm. That include flexibility too. I mean, boy, here's another problem. I'm not a very good rule follower. So staying within established boundaries is difficult. Oh, you don't want me to cross that line? Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. You don't want me to go there? Well, wait a minute.
You daredevil.
Well, I'd like to say I'm not a good rule follower, but daredevil would be okay too. Just, I don't like those, I don't like parameters that say you can't go someplace. This is going to sound ridiculous maybe, but I remember visiting, probably Lincoln's home at some point in downstate Illinois. And there were doors that were closed, locked. You can't go in there. Why? I want to know what's in there. I want to know what's in behind the veil, right? Behind the closed door. So I always like to go where someone has set boundaries off my limits. But at the same time, it's a two-way street. I have to set the boundaries and stay within my own. So you see the problem there? I like to cross boundaries when they're set for me, and I have to stay within my boundaries that I set for myself. So sometimes it's a hard game to juggle.
So when we talk about, because this is about time to get unstuck is really about moving forward and change, right? So by moving forward and change, how do you feel boundaries, whether it's for you or your clients, play that important role to move forward?
Well, you know, I do believe that we teach by example. And so when we're talking about clients, it would be easy for me to let clients take advantage of me, to let sessions go longer because, oh, we're getting someplace and we haven't quite finished yet. Let's just do another 20 minutes so we can finish. And really, that's a way of teaching clients to take advantage of your boundaries, right?
Right.
So I have had to really teach myself and abide by the time limits I set for a session.
Right.
There was a time, Greg, when I had a very large hypnosis center with 5 other hypnotists, and we had hourly appointments. So I had someone waiting out in the lobby every hour to come in.
Right.
Sessions had to be 50 minutes. There was no two ways about it.
Right.
Life circumstances changed. I now have a home office, and which I absolutely love and adore. And a lot of my business is now online. So I do a lot of Zoom sessions.
Right.
And I could sometimes fudge it and take it beyond the boundaries to go into something else. But it is not a good plan for me or for my clients to say, ignore all of the rules or all of the boundaries or all of the stipulations. So that's something I've had to learn to do, that I am teaching people to establish their own boundaries when I respect my own.
Right.
That makes sense?
That does make complete sense. And taking it from another viewpoint, whether it's out of the office and stuff, for me, boundaries have been, I've always said yes to things and yes to a lot of things and stuff, and didn't have boundaries for me to be with self-care and that sort of thing. And also the big word when we talk about boundaries is no. No, thank you. I can't do that. You know, not today, maybe this time or whatever it is. What really helped me, and I've talked about this several times, and I always, the 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. If he sees this at some point, I would love to have him on the show. It's always a pipe dream. It's always a wish, a bucket list, whatever. Anyway, but in there, it talks about having your boundaries. And maybe they overlap at times with what someone else wants you to do and you don't want to do. So we just go along with it when we don't have boundaries to keep the status quo or not make waves or anything. But there's a dual thing that we're doing that I found is that we're not only hindering ourselves from our growth and to be able to stand up and have our confidence and courage and all those good things to do things in life, but we're also hindering the other person's growth.
Yes.
Because if we don't say, no, I can't, because we don't want them to get upset, right? Then if they were to get upset, they have to figure out why they're getting upset because we don't want to do something they want us to do.
Right.
And they get to grow that way. And the other thing is we're making an assumption that they would be upset if we didn't want it, when they might have said, okay, and they would have found someone else. Because people always, if there's people that take a lot, they always have someone else on the back burner.
Yes. And isn't it a little bit of a control freak issue? Because you want to control the outcome. You don't want to give anybody else the opportunity to say, oh, I don't like that, or have any kind of confrontation, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's also a little bit fear-based.
Everything's fear-based.
Yes. If you're afraid to say no, right. If you're afraid to say no, right, it's because what? They won't like us anymore. They won't go along with it. We'll have to defend our position. I mean, what is the point? If we do come to a conclusion about something, if we do set a boundary for ourselves and then we just are willy-nilly about it, that's a fear-based response too, is it not?
It is. I think all our challenges that we have individually, and they're all different, all are fear-based. My whole thing is it all comes down to fear. If there, I'm not, anybody can have any viewpoint about soul, God, Allah, Buddha, Jesus, whatever it is, right? So I'm going to just use the word God, right?
Okay.
Is that if there was a sin in those eyes of whatever, is fear. But actually also that fear is supposed to build, in my viewpoint, our faith in whatever it is to move through it, so that it takes all that charge away. It never goes away. All these things that we talk about never go away. It's just that we begin to have more muscle behind it, or more confidence behind it, and more faith behind it, that we just know how to handle it.
But let me say that it shouldn't go away. I mean,
Right.
Fear is a valuable emotion, right?
Right.
In Chicago, our tallest building, the Sears Tower, they've renamed it the Willis Tower, not important. But if you're standing on top of that building, looking over the edge and afraid that if you jumped, it would kill you, boy, that's a fear you want to hold on to.
Right. Right. Yes.
Right? If you're
Right.
afraid that if you walk in front of a bus, you could die, that's a fear you want to hold on to.
Right.
So fear is an important survival element for us. But
Absolutely.
now we go full circle back to boundaries, right?
Right. Right.
Because if we are afraid of stepping outside of our boundaries to avoid growth, that's a whole different thing. That is not a helpful fear.
Right. And I want to clarify, when I was talking about not going away, was that issue or that fear that we had, it's not that it goes away. That issue that we had been afraid of, we just now have the confidence to move through it, because like riding a bicycle, you've done it before. Now let's graduate to another challenge, because there's always challenges. But those boundaries of a fear of saying no, like you were talking about, or, oh, speaking up, or having an opinion, or saying yes. It can be totally opposite. It's that whole yin and yang.
Yeah.
Can I handle it? It's always.
And fear is one of those emotions that won't stick within its own boundaries sometimes.
Yeah.
Right? And what I mean by that is sometimes fear will step outside of the boundary of helpfulness, in other words, keeping you from stepping in front of a bus,
Right.
into keeping you from doing things that you would like to do, but you haven't ever tried before.
Right.
Where you don't have any empirical knowledge.
With fear, okay, so what I find, what we talk about a lot now in general as folks, is how I like to, people use the word anxiety a lot. That's fine. Or stress or whatever. That feeling is so close to that feeling of excitement that we've lived in that fear, what we think is fear, or we've labeled it to be anxious, when it could be, oh my gosh, I'm actually excited about going to this thing. And so it confuses the boundaries, because it's all enmeshed together.
See, now we come to the problem with boundaries. They get confused all the time. And sometimes when you set a firm boundary, you do have to be flexible with it. So having a boundary but still maintaining flexibility is one of those tightrope walking things too, don't you think?
I do. And also, if you put judgment on all of it, that makes it even more difficult, instead of saying like it's a bad or a good thing. So if we have a boundary and you are keeping your boundary of, let's say on Thursdays, I do this for me. It's my day.
Right.
And something comes up that you actually want to do that's not within what you said you were going to do, but it's really exciting, or it's a possibility for business, or it's a family function, or someone's coming into town. So you have to have that flexibility to say, okay, let me move this around to be able to still take care of myself and do what you want to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that example is one I ran across once when I was playing with the Paul McKenna weight loss plan. Do you know Paul McKenna?
I know of Paul McKenna. I've never met him in person, but I've seen him on TV.
Yeah. Hey, hypnotist. Okay. One of his weight loss rules was eat what you want, not what you should. Boy, that sounds like a freeing thing, doesn't it? Eat what you want, not what you should. And I thought, I can do that. Every time it's time to eat when you're hungry, eat what you want, not what you should. Eat consciously and stop when you're full. Those were his 4 rules. It was that one, eat what you want. It seemed like a boundary to me. So every time I was hungry and it was time to eat, I had to stop and think, what do I want? What do I really want? No, that's what I should eat. It became a very strict boundary that hemmed me in and caused confusion. Does that make sense to you?
It does, because you didn't know what you wanted.
That's right. And I had, oh my God, I don't really want anything. So does that mean I can't eat, or does that mean I should eat something that I know I should eat? No, I can't eat what I should. So there were too many boundaries, and it caused a problem, which I think is what we run into with clients a little bit. Their confusion about what they want and what they should.
You know, we were talking about good and bad, and that's where I kind of zipped off to the left, but making choices, and then if it's a choice that you didn't want and you found yourself somewhere, it's not a bad choice. It just takes you make another choice to go somewhere else. But it's the same thing about these boundaries. As you make up boundaries because you have goals or you have things that you want to come into, and if they're not working, then we have to have the flexibility to move them around to what works for us. And so when we're talking about choice, you're talking about the boundary about foods and stuff about choice, what you want, not what you should have. But then you go, okay, what do I want? And we get a lot of clients, even myself, sometimes I don't know what I want in certain instances. And that's also going back to, well, am I limiting my belief in my boundaries? If we have so many options, how do we choose? Now, I go to, I know what I don't want. And I can't.
Right. Right.
So my thing is, if you know what you don't want, you can't say, I don't want this, I don't want this, because the universe will bring it to you to show that you have faith to move through it.
Right.
So,
Right.
I just say, okay, I don't want this, flip it. So I don't want to be, what don't I want? There's a lot of things I don't want, but now I can't think of one.
Well,
I don't want to be anxious, let's say.
okay, right.
So what do I want? You can't not be anxious because you're constantly thinking about anxious. So within the boundary, every time I think about that, then my boundary for me is, then we move towards calm, right?
Good, yeah.
Or content, or whatever is the opposite of that. And learning what you do want is a big skill to go along with that, so that you can make the boundaries of, because people will convince you to do things you don't want to do.
Well, that was the other thing. That was the other thing. When your boundaries conflict with someone else's boundaries, this is what I want from my life. I want to be a free spirit. And then you run across people who say, oh, but no, you have to be in this confine or this confine, or you have to do it this way in order to what? In order to what? And what I'm learning in my life and really moving toward is, I am directing my scene. I am directing my play. This is my play. And what I need to do is learn how to most effectively, for me, direct my play. Getting back to that Paul McKenna issue, when I came across that, oh my God, there are boundaries that I want to cross and there are boundaries I have to stay within. What am I going to do? I can't eat until I figure it out. I made a list of all the things that I like and that I would want to eat. And if I came across that, here's my list of the things that I want. Right. So if I don't have it right now, oh, yeah, I like this or I like this, I can pick from this list. And I work with weight loss clients in that way sometimes.
Right.
What are the things in that boundary that you can have, that you do like, that satisfies you within that particular boundary that you've accepted, that you've agreed to?
Right.
The boundaries can be tricky.
And I think the boundaries also teach us, much like you made that list, to become more solution oriented instead of problem fixated. Okay, I don't know what I want, so how can I figure out what I do want? And you make the list, so then you have it. That solved an issue, so you have it. Or, do I want this job or not? What does it contain that I like? What does it contain that I don't like? How do I, there's a really cool exercise, core values, where you find out 5 words that pertain to your life that have always been consistent. And you can look at any situation and look at your 5 core values. What are you getting from it? What are you not getting from it? And it helps have a boundary of who you are as a person. So like, you might have a job that only gives you 2 out of 5 things, but it pays for the other 3 that are very important. So it gives you reasons and sort of things like that. So it's finding different tools or different ways to help construct the boundaries that work for you. And if people don't like your boundaries, that's where you really get to grow and say, okay, thanks. Thank you for your opinion.
And motivation strategies, yeah, thank you for your opinion. Motivation strategies sometimes stipulate how you deal with boundaries, right? An all or nothing person, a perfectionist, has a different view of boundaries than somebody who's a little more fluid, someone who has shades of gray. Yeah. And so sometimes we have to learn that about ourselves and figure out how we can take that, what we know about ourselves, and move through to the solution. Yeah. Sometimes it's easier to do for someone else than for ourselves, isn't it?
It's interesting, because sometimes, and we talked about this just before, is how as hypnotists and working with people with NLP and all sorts of things, different tools, is that we're having something going on that day, or I'll talk about me, I'm not going to talk about anybody else. I have something going on that day, and suddenly a client sits in my chair and they have the issue in a different format of the same thing. I'm like, oh, ding, ding, ding for everybody. You know?
Thank you, universe, for bringing me this so that I'll know how to work on it.
And I'll even tell them, I was just thinking about this today. You know, I was
Right.
working ahead. I knew you were coming somehow. I don't know. So it's kind of a funny thing.
The universe has a way of plopping in front of you what you need to know, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And we get to choose what we notice in the universe too.
Right.
We get to choose, and we can move around it. So boundaries and flexibility go kind of hand in hand, and it's interesting to maneuver around that.
And I was going to say, as you change and build boundaries, you will change also friends.
Well, yes.
And colleagues and stuff, because you're shifting and you no longer fit in their dynamic, which is okay. You just
Right.
don't see them as often or whatever it is, which I find interesting. Guess what? That was fast, wasn't it?
That was fast.
That's a good thing. So that just gives us a couple seconds. That's the alarm to say, hey.
Wrap it up.
Yep. Was there anything about boundaries or that you felt like you didn't get to say, or that you wanted to leave people with, or?
Just that it's important to set them, and it's important to understand what's most important to you to stay within or be flexible around. I think
the word practice them. It's
and
not.
practice.
Yeah, practice them. What feels right? It's like going to try on clothes. What does this feel like? Okay, I need it a little bit let out here. I need a little bit taken in the waist or whatever, so. Yeah.
Automate it or make it regular. Make it put it on autopilot.
Yeah.
Following those boundaries on autopilot.
Cool. I appreciate this talk about boundaries. I want to give you a moment to let people know where they can find you. And you said you do Zoom and stuff like that, so.
I do about a little over, almost 70% of my practice, I guess now, is on Zoom, is via the internet. So you can find me at KarenHand.com, or you can email me at Karen@KarenHand.com. Could I have made that any easier?
And also, it'll be on, if anybody's watching it. I mean, after you finish watching, it'll be up for all her information. And you can find me here at Time to Get Unstuck. Also Facebook, Greg Beckett, Motivational Hypnotist. And there's also a page for Time to Get Unstuck. Google me.
You're doing wonderful things.
Google her.
Thank you for doing all that you do for us.
Thank you, and thanks for your time. And till next time, thanks everybody for watching.